y'all, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be making these bomb summer shorts with the ruffled waist. Okay, super cute. This is going to be, I would say, an advanced beginner, but follow along. I'm sure you could totally tackle it, no worries. Here are a list of things that you will need in order to get this thing started. If you have not subscribed to the channel, definitely do so. Subscribe, like, share, comment down below, and let's get started. Once you've taped your pattern together and you cut out your pattern, now you're ready for your pattern layout onto your fabric. My fabric was 6 inches wide, so I was able to fit all of the pieces as shown here. And before you continue, we do have to trace those notches. For the notches that are on the edge of the garment or the edge of the pattern, I just put little snippets, or you can mark it with a pencil. But the interior ones, I like to use tracing paper. The tracing paper, it has that carbon wax-free, it's like powder-ish. I'm not really sure what it's made of, but well, how I used it, I sandwiched the fabric inside of the tracing paper, and from there I just trace on top of it. What it does is create an imprint on the side that is actually touching the dye, or the powdered side, I guess you could call it. It is wax free. You can literally use like a wet washcloth to remove the residue, so it's not something that's going to stain your material and have like lasting effects. It can definitely disappear. Now there are other methods to use in order for you to get these notches and these markings onto your pattern, and if there is something that you prefer to use besides this, or this is not available to you, then just use whatever is available. I used the red one, but it didn't show through the blue material, so I had to do it again with yellow marking. That way you guys can see what I was doing. Now, I know some of you are looking at this pattern like, this looks a whole lot longer than the original pair of shorts she had in the beginning of the video. And that is correct, because I made these twice, and simply because of this marking right here that is so important. Please make sure you have it. Later on, I'll show a video on how to convert these shorts into this pattern that is before you, which is a pair of pants. Go ahead and sit the pattern aside, grab your pocket pattern, lay it right sides together. If you had cut lining, then use that, put the right sides together of the lining. We are going to sew the perimeter of the pocket. So starting at the upper edge of the pocket, we're going to sew the perimeter at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When you get to a corner, make sure you backstitch, of course. Once you get to a corner, sink your needle, pivot and turn, and then keep going. You are going to repeat this process every time you get to a corner. Again, you sink your needle first, pivot and turn, and keep going. I'm not the type to give it and read it out to your mind. Let me tell you now, I gotta crush on you. When I was looking outside, girl, you got me lost in your eyes. I got you when you're falling. Just know that I won't be here for long. Thinking of you all day, yeah. Running in my head, all or nothing. 'Cause I just know you. Make sure to backstitch at the end. Now that you are done, bring it over to the table, grab your fabric scissors, and now we are going to trim. For the corners, trim it off as shown here. That way, when you flip it around, or inside out, it's laying flat. Otherwise, there'll be too much bulkiness in the corners and it won't lay. For the little interior angles, you can make V-shaped cutouts. That way, again, when you turn it inside out, you're removing that bulkiness and it will lay flat. Repeat that for all the corners and all the interior angles.
Just know you got me thinking about forever. Gotta crush on you. I just wanna be.
Once complete, go ahead and turn your pocket inside out. Now, if you would like to add a top stitch in order to prevent it from rolling, you can definitely do so. My lining is different colors than the actual fabric itself, so periodically, to an extent, the gray does show. But if you're using the same material and you use it for your lining, then this part really wouldn't matter on if you use a top stitching or not. Go ahead and turn your pocket inside out. Try to get it as flat as possible. Iron is important. Use your iron, it's your best friend. All right, now that it's ironed and it's laid nice and flat, again, this is the pant pattern because there was a whole lot of shenanigans that happened the first time. So line up that pocket to the markings that you made. Make sure that you're not pinning both center fronts together. So move it out the way. Line it up. I lined my pocket to the upper edge instead of the lower edge because the upper edge will be the actual belt hoop, and it has to match up with the notches that we have on the side seam as well as the center front. When I originally cut out my pattern for the center front, I did not account for the overlap, and it left me with 1/4 inch marking. So that's why there's that line at the bottom and it's not matching up with my actual pocket pattern. But just keep that in mind when you are, cutting out your paper pattern and you're taping it. It's important to match those markings that are on the paper. Add your pins in place, secure it, make sure that your pattern is nice and flat and it's not shifting or tilting out of the way. So just as before, we're going to add some markings onto the pocket. That way we know where to add our stitch line. Unless you can pinpoint it, then if so, I mean, you got great eyeballs. I can't do that. I need some lines. That way I can see what I'm doing. So using your original pattern or the pocket pattern and some tracing paper, lay that tracing paper down on top of your pocket. Again, this should have been done in the beginning, but your girl slipped again. So we're gonna just do it now, that way we can move on. Add your tracing paper, grab your tracing wheel, and you're gonna mark that stitch line. You should have repeated that process for the left and the right side of the center front. Once complete, have both sides lay next to each other and measure. Grab your measuring tape, and what you're gonna do is measure the distancing from the side seam of the center front over to the edge of the pocket, right? Measure it on both sides, make sure that they match. And then from there, I want you to measure the top of the pocket to the edge of the center front. You're going to repeat this for the left and the right side. Before you sew the other side or pin the other side down, just double check those measurements. It's always good to measure twice, 3 times, 4 times even, just to make sure everything is sitting where it's supposed to sit, instead of going through the whole process, rushing through it, sewing it, and then later on having to pull out that seam ripper to take that seam or that stitch out. take your time. If we're gonna build a wardrobe, let's do our best to do it right. That way our garment can come out looking amazing. From here, you're going to start at the bottom of the pocket, follow the perimeter, remain at an 1/8 inch seam allowance from the edge, and backstitch once you get across the little tracing mark that we are about to add. Again, these markings are supposed to be done when your pattern is flat, it's not sewn. That way you're not getting any margin of error, or your margin of error would be less. Learn from my mistakes and do not repeat what I do. Do as I say, not as I do, is what they say. Definitely learn from it. That way you're not repeating those mistakes. Now, the next part here will be to sew that perimeter, but for some reason I lost my footage, so I had to create another pair of pants. I think I'm going on like my 4th pair of pants here for this thing, but anyway, I digress. We're just gonna keep going. For the perimeter stitch, start at the side seam. You're gonna sink that needle, make sure you back stitch into it, and again, it's gonna be like an edge stitch very close to the edge of the fold, and keep your material straight. Once you get to your corner, sink your needle, lift up your presser foot, pivot and turn, and keep going upwards. Now, once you get to your tracing mark that we added at the base of the opening, we're gonna sink our needle, pivot and turn. That way we can go on the opposite direction. And this time I want you to back stitch there before going forward. The reason to why we back stitch is to secure the base of that belt hoop. If we do not back stitch there, that little anchor or corner is going to be super weak, okay? You're gonna go back to the side seam again, and this time you're just going to add a top stitch right next to the original stitch line. Let it be your guide. Remain true to your spacing. You could do it 1/4 of an inch, or I think I did it at an 1/8 of an inch just to keep it very small. And again, when you get to the top, make sure you back stitch. That way that seam is not coming apart. You want your pockets to be firm, and you want the seams to be strong. That way they're not ripping when you put things in your pocket. Move up to the top of the belt hoop. You're gonna back stitch at one corner, sew forward, and back stitch at the end of the stitch line. And again, you're back stitching there to make sure that that seam is remain firm so that it doesn't break when you are pulling and tugging at your belt tie. Repeat this for both sides. Set your pattern aside, and we are going to move on to the belt tie. For the belt tie, you're going to add a perpendicular stitch towards the long end. Once you have that stitch, iron your seam open and fold the belt tie right sides together and add your pins. There is a right and wrong way to pin your material, but as long as your head is not going towards the body of the sewing machine, then you're fine. It's not a big deal. You just have to make sure your pins are there. But I'm sure if my professor was watching this, he would be flipping his hair back. All right, don't forget your notches, because that's where you're gonna leave your opening. And from there, you are ready to start sewing. We're gonna start at the very edge, the folded edge, and we're gonna backstitch. Backstitching is important so that your seam doesn't unravel. Backstitch it and go towards that other corner. You're gonna sink your needle. Oh, this is a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Sink your needle, and you're gonna pivot and turn by lifting up the presser foot, and then keep going. When you get to that first notch, make sure you backstitch. And what I did was just pull my material back a little bit. I didn't even cut the thread or anything, just pull it back and line it up again. 1/2 inch seam allowance, sink your needle, backstitch again, and then keep going. When you get to your overlapping seam where you attach the belt ties together, make sure you confirm that the bottom of the seam allowance is opened. Sometimes it folds over, and that completes your belt tie. Now we're gonna dive into the trimming world. Trim off the corners of your belt tie so that you can turn it inside out and that it will lay flat. Always do this for all of your corners in any garment, really. It doesn't necessarily have to be the belt tie. From there, grab your seam turner and just drop it in there.
Ain't the same when the sun when you know you really like.
Once it's in there, tuck the edge or the ending part of the belt tie into it, and you're gonna slide that loop down to tighten the tweezer portion, right? And then gently glide the seam allowance over so that you turn that belt tie inside out. Grab your point turner and we're gonna use it to point out those corners. The point turner is awesome for things that it could actually fit in, okay? Because this thing is about 1 inch big, and there are times where whatever you're turning, it's not that big. What if it's 1/2 inch? Then you're not gonna be able to get to that edge. Okay, it's just not gonna happen. There are tricks for it, that way you can adjust it, but if you have something that is pointed laying around, you can always use that. I like to use pencil tips because I know it's not going to affect my garment to that extent. If you're using a pen, obviously there's ink at the edge and it's going to damage your material. Then you're having to look into how you're going to clean it. Sometimes the ink doesn't come out. So if you find like a coloring pencil that is the same color as the fabric, then you're good to go. You're going to repeat the same process for the other side. Make sure you trim the corners. Make sure when you drop the seam turner inside of it, it's gripping the very end, and push that loop towards the opening. That way it locks that material into place. And then from there, you just slightly just glide that seam allowance towards the end as you pull it out. It will turn the belt tie inside out. Guess what? Ironing time. Don't you just love it? I'm just kidding. I know you guys don't like ironing. Go ahead and iron it flat. Again, ironing is your best friend. It makes anything look nice and crisp. So iron it to the best of your ability. And from there, we are going to top stitch the perimeter. Yes, I lost some footage on that too, so I had to adjust. So for your belt tie, sink your needle. When you get to your corners, just like before, pivot and turn with the presser foot up. Once you have it in alignment where you need to go, put your presser foot back down and keep going. You are going to keep that 1/4 inch seam allowance all around. When you get to your starting point, make sure you backstitch there. That way it doesn't unravel. Remember, it's a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that you are done, this is a quick overview of what the belt tie looks like. Sit it aside because we won't need it again until the end. Go ahead and grab your center front and your center back shorts. Lay it flat. You are going to pin the side seam of your center front to the side seam of your center back. Once you have it pinned, you're going to move on to your inseam, which is where the crotch is. You're going to pin it as well and get ready to sew. The seam allowance for this will be at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Always make sure to backstitch in the beginning of the seam as well as the end. When I am sewing these long seams, usually I just put a small little gap in between it, and then from there I continue on to the next seam by simply lining it up. So in the end, you'll end up having what looks like a sausage link, where the pattern pieces are like simply just connected with that one little thread, and then from there you just like snip them. This method tends to work for me instead of pulling the thread every time. Back to the yellow shorts, because I lost footage again. I really don't know what happened, but once you're done with the seam, you are going to serge. That way you keep it nice and clean. If you do not have a serger, you can always use bias tape to cover it. You can use pinking shears to trim it. That way it doesn't fray. Besides that, I can't think of any other options besides like doing like a flat stitch, but that requires a little bit more extra steps in order to get it done. So do what you need to do in order for you to clean off that raw edge to prevent it from fraying. Bring your garment back over to the table. Well, your garment pieces back over to the table, and this time you're gonna turn it inside out. So you'll have one pattern that is inside out, and then the other one is gonna be right side out. The one that is right side out, I want you to insert it inside of the one that is outside in. Okay? That way, once you insert it inside of the other, the right sides will be facing, and you're able to sew onto the wrong side. I know, it was a lot. If you need to rewind this, go ahead and rewind it. That way, you're sewing the right parts together in the correct order. Once you have it, add your pins. You're gonna pin the crotch area. Be easy around the curvature. My fabric, well, for these shorts, it's more like a gauze material, so it kind of have a stretch to it. So just keep that in mind if you are using that type of fabric. But once you get to the seam, have one side face left and the other one face right. This will remove some of the bulkiness for that, that seam, the inseam where it meets. And just continue pinning until you get up to the center front waist or the center back waist, and then you will be sewing this at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Again, the seam allowance is a 1/2 inch. Make sure when you get to your seam allowance for the other seam that one is going in one direction and the other is facing the opposite to that. Once you're done sewing, then you're ready to serge. It's always, for this seam, you're gonna serge it closed. All of the seam, we've had to serge them closed. There was nothing that was serged open. Go ahead and serge it closed. You don't have to trim anything off. A lot of times I don't, but if there's a lot of fray, then yes, I'll trim it off. That way it's not like dangling threads that I have to clean off later. Once you're done serging the seams, you might as well go ahead and serge the upper edge of the waistband. That way you have a clean finish. But from there, you can fold the waistband over onto itself at 2.5 inches. The 2.5 inches will allow you to create your casing and the little gathered ruffle effect that is at the top of the waistband. It's really important that you measure with your sewing gauge. That way you have a true 2.5 inches. You guys already know what I'm gonna say. Iron, iron, iron. It makes life easier, I promise you, okay? I promise you. Grab that iron and make that crease on the fabric. From there, you're gonna grab your seam gauge again, and this time you're gonna measure 1 inch from the needle of the sewing machine. That way you can sew 1 inch perimeter all the way around the waistline. That's gonna be the upper edge of your casing. You don't have to backstitch in the beginning, but you do have to backstitch in the end to close it in order to prevent it from unraveling.
Like that, like this, like that, then like this, do it like that, like that, do it like that, then like this, do it like
Now that you've created the upper edge of the casing, you are ready to move on to the secondary stitch in order to close that casing completely. From that first stitch, you're going to measure with your measuring gauge or your sewing gauge 1 inch and 1/4. You can use a ruler or your measuring tape, just angle it. Now, the little doohickey, as I call, that I have there on the side is a magnet piece. I purchased it from, I think it was Amazon, if not Alibaba. But you can find those. It's just a magnetic, it's literally just magnetic. It sits there and it allows you to align the upper edge of your garment. That way your seam allowance is true. Whenever I'm making these huge like spacings as far as seam allowance, I always use it because it just makes it easier. Now I can gauge it with my eyeballs, but you know, periodically your eyes lead you astray. So if you have something that you could just line it up against there, you know it's stationary, it's not moving for the time being, then just use it. Make life easier. But go ahead and start sewing. Make sure you backstitch in the beginning, and you are going to leave a small opening because if you close it off all the way, you're not going to be able to get that elastic in there, okay? So when you start, leave a small opening, backstitch a little bit. That way that seam is not tearing open once you start working your elastic in it. And then you're going to leave about 2 inches gap and then backstitch at the closing. Go ahead and sit your garment aside, and now we are gonna work on those belt hoops. For the belt hoops, I did lose footage again, so grab your sewing pattern and we're gonna sew along the long side. Your seam allowance is gonna be 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then from there you're gonna turn it inside out. Now for this yellow fabric, it is very lightweight since it's a gauze. So I went ahead and I top stitched it just so that it could remain sturdy. Fold it into a tri-fold, and now you have 3 belt hoop pieces. 1, 2, 3. You're gonna fold the raw edge towards itself, and you're gonna repeat that process for both sides. That will be the top and bottom of your belt hoop. Repeat this step for all 3 belt hoops. It's better when you iron it because the fold will remain in place and it's stabilized as you pin and sew. Now that your belt hoops are nice and pretty, you are ready to attach it to your garment. So we're gonna first start off with the center back. Go ahead and pin it in place. And then from the center back and the side seam, we're gonna find the middle. And from there, add another belt hoop. Repeat this process for the other side. In total, you should have 3 belt hoops on the back side of your shorts. Once you have it pinned, you are ready to start sewing.
Can't read your mind and I've really tried. You won't let me in like we're strangers. Say opposite, supposed to attract.
So I lost the footage for this too. All you need to do is sew across the upper edge and the lower edge of the belt hoop. Keep it folded, keep your pins in place. That way you are remaining stabilized. That way you're keeping the belt hoop stabilized. And make sure you backstitch from the beginning and in the end. Y'all, listen, these videos, it's been a total field day for me. I don't think I've ever lost so many footage in my life. And I've made a lot of videos. It's been a total field day. Like Murphy's Law has been coming at me full throttle. But anyway, I digress. Let's carry on because we are almost done. Bring your garment over to the table. Trim off any excess threads that may be hanging. And as you can see, I've measured the top of my waist just to show how big of a difference it is. I mean, it's 24 inches laying on the floor times 2 because you have to look at the front and back. You're looking at 48 inches wide. That's pretty big. Yeah, I wouldn't fit that. So grab your seam turner and attach it to the elastic. The one that I use is very easy to use. I love it. I always use it whenever I'm trying to insert anything into a loop or a seam or anything like that because it just makes it so easy. But once you grip the elastic, insert it through the casing and just continue gliding it. You're gonna maneuver the material over the elastic. Periodically, make sure you hold on to the elastic whenever you're trying to shift the fabric down because you don't want it to detach from the seam turner itself. You want it to remain intact, otherwise if it gets lost in there you'll have to pull it out and start over again, and that's never fun. At the same time you're maneuvering that material over, make sure that your elastic is not twisting or flipping or doing anything besides staying nice and flat inside your casing. That's important. Otherwise, when you go to sew it, it's going to be twisted and there's nothing you're going to be able to do besides opening up that seam, taking that, elastic out in order to adjust it. So try to get it right before you close off your casing. Once you pull it out to the other side, you're going to pin it together with the other end. And then you're going to move those gathers so that they lay evenly across your garment.
For this level, I'ma let you do it. Me no get problem.
Alright, y'all, this is how the yellow shorts are looking right now. Oh, my third pair of shorts. Anyway, now we're gonna drag this over, well not drag, but bring it over to your sewing machine so that we can close off that elastic. As you can see here, I have it overlapped. It's not creating a point, it's overlapped so that it can lay flat within that casing. Adjust your spacing, that way you're able to maneuver it right underneath it. You can do a zigzag stitch over those overlaps, or you could do a straight stitch. Just make sure to make sort of like a rectangular stitch over that overlap, that way it doesn't unravel. Make sure to backstitch as well. Now, people would say since it is elastic and it's stretch material, you have to make sure you switch your needle point. The one that I have right now is universal, but ideally when you're dealing with stretch material or any type of rubber material, like the elastic, because there's rubber inside of it, you have to make sure you switch your needles to a stretch needle. The difference between the two is one comes to a point, and then the other one has a rounded point, which also comes to a point, but it's more rounded. So it allows you to better glide through your material without causing damage. Now that your elastic is complete, you're ready to close off your casing, starting at the beginning of your opening, backstitch so that you go into the original stitch lines about 3 stitches back, and then move forward. You're gonna sew forward until you reach the other stitch line, and make sure to backstitch, that way it doesn't unravel. When you are creating this stitch, make sure that you do not go over your elastic. Work your gathers into place so that it's nice and even. And then from here, we're gonna add some stabilizing stitches, vertical stitches I call them, onto your side seam. This will prevent the elastic from rolling when you are taking the garment off or when you're putting it on. I don't know if you've ever had those garments where you're sliding them on and then all of a sudden the elastic does like a tumbleweed, rolling stone type of deal. And next thing you know, it's taking you another 15 minutes to situate the bloody elastic that's inside of a casing. Just add those tacks there. You could do it by hand, or you could use your sewing machine and just add like a couple of stabilizing stitches there. It's really technically called a tack. Even if it's just like 3 stitches forward, 3 stitches back, that should be enough to stabilize it. You can also add it into the center front. You're not going to be able to do it on the center back only because you have your belt hoop there. But if you want to pick like a certain little hidden spot and add a stabilizing stitch there, that'll be perfect. It wouldn't cause any harm. All right, y'all, guess what I'm about to tell y'all to do again. Grab your iron along with your seam gauge, but yes, your iron. You're gonna measure that hemline. We are almost done. Yes, thank you, baby Jesus. Okay, you're gonna measure at 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you're gonna iron. I like to iron my hems as I go because it makes it super easy when it comes time to sewing. Like, you almost don't even need to pin unless you have like a really slinky fabric that is very disobedient to the heat and it doesn't stay in place. Like crepe de chine is that disobedient fabric. At least some of the ones I've had, it just doesn't hold a, man, it doesn't hold a wrinkle for nothing. So you have to use like additional measures, such as starch, spray, in order for you to keep it in place. But you're gonna fold this at 1/4 inch, iron it all the way around, and then fold it again on top of itself. This is so that you are encasing the raw edge in order for you to create that hem. If you have any random stragglies, like I do, random pieces of thread that are hanging, right now would be a good time to clean them off, because if you decide to sew that on, it's gonna be a little bit more difficult for you to clean it. Now, sometimes I don't clean it off. I actually tuck it within the fold, and it's hidden. I don't have to worry about cutting anything. It just doesn't show. Now, if it's a sheer fabric where it's transparent, obviously that is important. It's best for you to cut off those little excess stragglies, excess, random threads, and then from there, you can fold and do your hem. So keep that in mind. All right, so bring it over to your sewing machine, and you are going to sew very close to that upper edge. I like to sew onto the wrong side, because if you do it on the right side, technically you're sewing blind. You can hope that everything is matched up, but if you do it to the wrong side, then you just have that guide and you follow it as your point of reference. What I like to do is move the needle closer towards the middle. That way I can see that folded edge and I'm able to follow it as a guide. It's always best that you start on a seam. That way when you're overlapping, it's not something that's like right in the front where it's going to show the overlapping. If it's on the seam allowance already, like your side seam or your inseam, it's even better. It won't be seen as somebody's putting on and taking off the garment. Make sure you backstitch so that it doesn't unravel, and you repeat the same thing for the other side. And we are done. Grab your snippers, cut off any excess thread. Don't leave the threads on there, please. Please, you guys. Clean off your material. This fabric, I had it for a very long time, and yeah, it had some strange markings on there that I definitely need to wash off before it can be worn. Now, ideally, you should always wash your fabric before you wear it anyway, but for the sake of time, I like to just dive right in and just start creating stuff and then just do one wash in the end. Okay, so this is the final result of the shorts. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Happy sewing. If you have not subscribed to the channel, definitely do so. Subscribe, share, like, comment, all of the above. And check out the Etsy shop because this is where this sewing pattern is going to be listed. If you have any questions, hit me up on Etsy. I am more than happy to respond. And yeah, happy sewing. I'll see you next time. Thanks for hanging out with me today.